The engine of our B-17 flying fortress, which we named Pacific Phantom, roars powerfully, and the metal parts creak under the pressure of the air. The Phantom is our pride, a mighty flying fortress that has pulled us out of hell more than once. Every crew member feels safer in its steel embrace. We are currently traversing the skies over the Pacific, heading towards Japanese targets on distant islands. The sun is slowly disappearing below the horizon, and our target is getting closer with every second. Suddenly, the space around us bursts into bright lights. It's anti-aircraft fire from the ground. Flares shoot up like infernal torches, and the air around us is filled with the sound of explosions. The space we were just flying through peacefully turns into a death zone. "Hold on!" I shout to the crew, trying to keep my cool, but I know everyone feels the same fear. Every second could be our last. The first volley of shells passes by, but the next one hits our fuselage. The Phantom shakes under the impact, as if it's fighting for its life and we're fighting along with it. The sound of metal being torn apart by explosions pierces through me. I feel the aircraft losing stability, and one of the wings starts to wobble dangerously. The situation becomes increasingly dire, but we must continue the mission.
"Target in sight,"
the bombardier shouts, and I focus on the task at hand. We have to deliver our payload no matter what. Below us, the targets, Japanese military installations and ammunition depots, stretch out. On command, the bombardier releases the bombs.
Eagle 1, first strike, you have permission to engage the target.
I feel the plane lift as the weight of the load leaves our bomb bay. Everything around us fills with fire. The bombs hiss as they hit the ground, and their explosions light up the night sky. Each hit is a colossal blast that scatters earth, debris, and fragments in all directions. The Japanese installations turn into burning ruins, and for a moment, I feel relief. We did it. But it's only a temporary victory.
"On our tail!"
The tail gunner yells. I turn my head and see several Japanese fighters descending from the sky. Jim, with cold determination, aims at the approaching aircraft. His machine gun thunders, and successive bursts of bullets whistle ominously through the air. The first enemy plane is hit. Flames erupt on its wing, and the aircraft begins to dive downward, straight into the depths of the ocean. Jim doesn't slow down. He swivels the turret and opens fire on the second plane. Another hit. I see the enemy losing control, and his plane crashes into the water. But the third fighter, fast and agile, approaches with incredible speed. The pilot of the Japanese Zero is extremely precise. Jim turns the turret, trying to get a lock on him, but the opponent is quicker. The enemy aircraft fires a burst from its 20mm cannons. The shells hit the Phantom. The fuselage shudders under their force, and one of them strikes the turret. I see Jim, our best gunner, get hit. His body slumps lifelessly, and blood quickly spreads throughout the turret. I try to shout, to rally the crew, but my voice catches in my throat. It feels like this is the end. Suddenly, from the side, I hear the sound of another bomber. It's one of our squadron mates who opens fire on the enemy fighter just in time. A burst from his cannons tears through the fuselage of the Japanese plane, which turns into a ball of fire and plummets downward. For a moment, I feel relief. Maybe we still have a chance, but it doesn't last long. I watch as that same bomber that saved us gets hit by anti-aircraft fire from the ground. The explosion rips its fuselage apart, and the entire aircraft becomes a fiery blaze that descends to the earth. No chance of survival. The Phantom starts losing altitude. The wing is severely damaged, and one of the engines fails. I try to control the plane, but wind and smoke flood the cockpit. I decide to turn back. We have no choice. We must head back to base if we want any chance of survival. The Phantom's engine still rumbles, though with difficulty. One wing is seriously damaged, and the fuselage is riddled with holes from the shells. The cabin is silent. Apart from the sound of the engine, there's only our labored breathing. Of the entire crew, only Tom, the co-pilot, and I are left. The rest are dead. their bodies now lying motionless in different parts of the plane. I feel the pain of losing my friends, but there's no time for grief. We have to get back to base. We have to survive. We fly over an unknown island when I notice a strange, pulsating light emanating from the volcano at its center. Something unsettling, almost hypnotic, compels me to look down. What the hell is that? Suddenly, I feel a cold chill on the back of my neck as if a warning of the approaching nightmare. Do you see that, Tom? That light? It doesn't look like anything I've seen before, I say, trying to stay calm, though I can feel my anxiety rising.
Yeah, I see it.
Tom replies, his voice tinged with uncertainty.
It's strange. Why the hell would a volcano be glowing?
I have no idea, but something doesn't feel right. Maybe we should report it.
And what will we say? That we saw some weird light at the end of the world? They'll think we've lost our minds.
Maybe you're right, but something doesn't feel right to me. We'd better get out of here as quickly as we can. A moment later, the plane is jolted by a violent tremor. The instrument panel flickers, and we are yanked in our seats. My heart sinks as I realize that something is seriously wrong. Tom, you need to check what damage we have in the rear of the plane, I say, trying to keep my voice steady, though inside I feel the growing anxiety. Tom nodded, though his eyes betray doubt. His steps, initially firm, begin to fade as he moves down the narrow corridor leading to the bomb bay and further to the rear of the plane. I'm left alone in the cockpit, and my thoughts circle around that strange light which shouldn't be there. Minutes pass, and Tom doesn't return. Instead, the air fills with strange, muffled sounds, rustling, faint groans. Tom, everything all right? I call out, but my words are swallowed by the silence, which becomes increasingly ominous. No answer. Something is definitely wrong. I engage the autopilot and head to the back of the plane. The corridor seems endlessly long, and each step becomes increasingly difficult. As I approach the door leading to the crew compartment, the sounds become clearer. Soft crunches, as if something is breaking, wet, loud noises that send shivers down my spine. I grab the handle, my heart pounding like a hammer. The door opens slowly, creaking ominously, as if warning me of what I'm about to see. The sight that greets me is like a nightmare come to life. Tom lies on the floor of the compartment, his body being torn to shreds by what once was my crew. Jim, who was once our best gunner, now kneels over Tom, biting into his neck. His half-shattered skull reveals pulsing, bloody brain tissue, and eyes that were once full of life are now empty and soulless. Tom's blood spills across the floor, forming a pool that grows with every moment, and his body convulses in the final throes of life. The air is thick with the sickening smell of blood and death. To my horror, I realize that Jim isn't the only one who has changed. The rest of the crew, previously dead, are now slowly rising from the spots where they perished. Their bodies are covered in wounds, with entrails trailing along the floor. Their skin is torn and rotting. Bobby, whose abdomen is ripped open, slowly rises to his feet, his intestines staining the floor, trailing like grotesque ribbons. His face, once full of life, is now twisted into a grotesque grimace, with black, bloody foam dripping from his mouth. Charlie, always feisty, is now barely recognizable. Half of his face is torn off, revealing white bone and bloody muscle. They all start moving towards me, their steps stiff, but their intent is clear. Their lifeless eyes fix on me as if they see in me the sole purpose of their existence. Another victim to tear apart. Their moans fill the interior of the plane, flooding me with disgust and horror. I can't believe what I'm seeing. My friends, comrades in arms now turned into monsters, ready to kill me. I feel my body freezing, my legs turning to jelly, but instinct tells me to run. I know I have to act before they get to me. I dash for the door, my heart pounding wildly. I slam the door shut behind me, locking it with whatever I can find. Locked in the cramped cockpit, I feel the air growing heavier. Each breath reminds me that I'm trapped with no way out. The sounds of pounding come from behind the door. I know I don't have much time. Sooner or later, the monsters will break through the makeshift barricade and grab me with their blood-stained claws. Suddenly, I remember the parachute still stored in the compartment behind my seat. This might be my only chance. I put on the parachute with trembling hands, frantically trying to assess my chances of survival. The door begins to buckle under the pressure. I hear the metallic groan echo through the cockpit and my heart leaps into my throat. The monsters on the other side don't relent. Their groans and furious growls fill the cabin, making me feel like I'm in hell. I decide to take a desperate step. If I'm going to die, I'd rather do it on my own terms. I quickly open the emergency exit. Wind rushes into the cockpit with terrifying force, scattering everything around. But I ignore it and prepare to jump. However, something stops me at the last moment. The realization that I'm still above that cursed island. Where will I land? What will I find there? But there's no time to think. The cockpit door finally breaks, and the first of those monstrous creatures bursts in. Their grotesque, ghastly faces are turned towards me, and terrifying moans escape their mouths. I feel something grab my pant leg. It's him, my former friend, now transformed into a nightmarish monster. I kick him away with all my strength and leap into the void. The moment of freedom as I feel the wind whipping against my falling body is short-lived. I yank the cord, and the parachute opens with a snap. My body begins to descend slowly towards the island. Below me, I see its dark, dense forest and irregular coastline. The wind pushes me further inland, and after a moment, I land heavily in the undergrowth, getting tangled in vines and branches. For a moment, I lie there, trying to catch my breath. My senses are on high alert, and every rustle makes my heart race. I finally manage to free myself from the tangle of straps and stand up. I'm surrounded by a wild, unfamiliar jungle, and the air is thick and humid. I look around, trying to assess the situation. In the moonlight, I can make out the contours of something larger, hidden in the shadows of the trees. I move closer and see the wreckage of a plane, one of those that must have crashed here years ago. When I step into the open, I am horrified to notice that I'm surrounded by plane wrecks, old rusted fuselages, some covered in moss, others still smoldering as if the crash had just happened. It was a true graveyard. My eyes catch sight of a B-24 Liberator, its metal shell torn to shreds. Next to it lies a shattered Douglas C-47 Skytrain, with faint smoke still rising from its fuselage, as if it still remembers its last tragic moments. Further on, I see fragments of P-51 Mustangs and also a Mitsubishi Zero, now crushed, destroyed, as if consumed by this cursed island. I notice twisted and rusted fragments of bombers, their wings still jutting from the ground like sad monuments to horrifying events. Here and there, scattered elements of cockpits can be seen, with the mangled skeletons of pilots still inside. Their remains stripped of all dignity, covered in moss and decaying leaves. As I pass by one of them, I suddenly feel a strange, ominous presence, as if death itself still lingers over this place. I stop for a moment, trying to control my fear, when suddenly I notice one of the skeletons begin to move. At first, it seems like a trick of my imagination, that fatigue and stress are playing tricks on me. But it's no illusion. The skeleton in the cockpit lifts its head, and its hollow eye socket seems to be staring directly at me. With horror, I watch as bony fingers start to move, as if trying to reclaim their former life. Mechanically and slowly, the skeletons of the crew members, who just moments ago seemed dead forever, now rise from their seats. Their movements are stiff, unnatural. The sight of their rotting uniforms, still clinging to these bones, sends a cold shiver down my spine. Their jaws begin to move as if trying to produce sounds, but instead, only a dry creaking and inhuman moans come from their throats. Eyes that once looked through the glass of the cockpit are now empty and dead, turning towards me. I feel my heart pounding like a hammer, and my legs become as heavy as lead. Then, with horror, I notice more figures emerging from the darkness between the densely growing trees, with rot, blood, and death accompanying their every step. These are zombies, dozens, if not hundreds. I see their blood-soaked teeth, their empty eye sockets, and skeletal hands that want to tear me apart. There's nowhere to run. I'm surrounded on all sides. Their screams and moans fill the air, and I know the end is near. But I won't go down without a fight. I take a deep breath, feeling adrenaline surge through my veins, turning fear into desperation. I still have a pistol in my hand, the last trace of my connection to the world of the living. I grip it tightly, feeling the cold metal under my fingers. I refuse to give up. Not yet. The first zombie approaches me. Its face, or what's left of it, is deformed, partially torn apart. Its eyes, though empty, stare at me with unnerving intensity. I aim the gun and fire. The gunshot echoes through the jungle, and the bullet tears through the creature's skull, shattering it into pieces. Its body slumps to the ground, but it's only a temporary victory. More of them are coming. 2, 3, 5. With each passing second, there are more of them. I shoot again, one after another, trying to keep them at bay, but I know my chances are dwindling by the moment. The bullets are slowly running out, and the monsters keep advancing, reaching out their decaying hands towards me. The air is filled with the stench of death and decay, and their moans grow louder, almost deafening. Miraculously, a small gap opens up in the ranks of the surrounding zombies. Seizing the moment, I dash forward, leaping over tree roots, and desperately make a break for the jungle, trying to find any sort of shelter. The jungle seems to close in around me, and their inhuman moans resonate in the darkness, echoing off the trees. I feel fear tightening around me like an invisible noose. Every step is a struggle with my own body, which is starting to give out. My legs feel like jelly, and my lungs burn with the effort. Sweat pours down my face, mixing with dirt and blood. Branches snag at my clothes, tearing the fabric and scratching my skin, as if the jungle itself has conspired against me. I hear the monsters crashing through the underbrush behind me. Their footsteps, initially distant, are now terrifyingly close. Desperate, I trip over a root, falling to my knees. I hear something crunching under my boots. Perhaps old rotting leaves, or maybe the bones of long-forgotten victims of this cursed island. As I scramble to my feet, I notice with growing horror that new zombies are beginning to emerge from beneath the jungle's undergrowth, clawing their way up from the earth all around me. Suddenly, a cold, rotting hand grabs my ankle, pulling me down. Panic surges through me as I kick frantically, managing to tear free from its grip and stumble forward into the thick of the jungle. I have only one thought in my mind: escape. I can't let them catch me. I feel adrenaline driving my body to its limits, as if it's the only thing keeping me alive. The jungle around me seems to pulse, its dark shadows engulfing everything, and I run as if every second might be my last. The monsters' footsteps are so close now that I can almost feel their breath on the back of my neck. Panic sets in as fear takes control of my mind. I run blindly, barely seeing anything through the tears and sweat that blur my vision. Finally, I spot something on the horizon, a ruined bunker partially hidden beneath thick vegetation. My heart races even faster. This might be my only chance, my only refuge from this nightmare. I force my legs to run faster, even though I feel them starting to give out. With every step, the monsters draw nearer, their moans almost deafening. When I reach the entrance, I force myself inside with difficulty and slam the heavy steel door shut behind me, nearly severing my fingers in the process. I hear their bodies slamming against the metal, their screams and moans filling the air. My heart pounds like a hammer, and my breathing is shallow and ragged. For a moment, I feel relief, but it quickly turns into fear. I know it's only a matter of time before they find a way to get to me. I stand up with difficulty, trying to steady my trembling legs. The bunker is large, with a labyrinth of dark corridors stretching deep into the earth, as if inviting me into the depths of an unknown hell. I hear footsteps, distant at first, but growing louder with each passing second. My pulse quickens as I realize they don't match my own. Something is out there, hidden in the darkness, closing in on me. The footsteps grow closer, echoing ominously through the narrow corridors of the bunker. My breath catches in my throat as I press myself against the cold, damp wall, straining to hear. Every muscle in my body tenses, ready to bolt at the slightest sign of danger. Then from the darkness ahead, I catch a glimpse, a shadow moving low to the ground, followed by the sickening stench of decay. My heart pounds in my chest as I realize with dread that I'm not alone down here. The nightmare isn't over. It's just beginning.